Our next guest is Alana Kirk.
Hello, Alana. How are you? Very nice to meet you. Alana Kirk.
Alana Kirk, short and sweet.
Yeah. What's your story? Where are you from and why are you here?
I'm work as a midlife coach. I work with women in particular in midlife to help them navigate the messy mayhem that can sometimes come at us. My own midlife imploded in many ways, and that set me on this road to do what I do, but also really to try and take advantage of what I would consider this to be a really unique midlife for women.
What are the signs of midlife happening? Like, where do you think midlife is?
I think midlife is anything from your mid-30s to your mid-60s. I mean, I think it's a massive extended period. And, just to put that in context, when my mum was born in 1936, her life expectancy at birth was 59. Now, obviously, because of massive improvements in health, she was in her early 80s when she died. But when my last daughter was born in 2010, her life expectancy is late 80s, likely to be adjusted to 100. So between my mum and my youngest daughter, there's nearly 30 years of extra living. I look at my mum's generation and she wouldn't have seen a woman over the age of 30 on the TV. Women on the TV were either sort of old hags or young, God, we had Benny Hill on the TV.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, my role model, the only role model I really had in terms of women, was Kate Adie, the BBC war correspondent. Yeah. And I used to sit in the lounge and she'd come be on our TV screen every night from Tiernan Square and all these amazing places. And, it wasn't her array of khaki shorts that I loved. It was just the fact that she was a woman doing this extraordinary job, because I just did not see that anywhere around me. But also she was telling people stories. I just loved that. And that set me on my dream. And, I didn't end up becoming Kate Adie, but I did end up working for UNICEF and doing a lot of travel and stuff. And I think I've been able to tell other people's stories most of my life in my jobs.
So what happened to you in your 30s or 40s that made you do this other type of work?
Yeah.
You kind of alluded that there was a kind of a moment of rupture or something.
Yeah.
What was that?
We won't say midlife crisis, we'll say catastrophe.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, I think I did what everyone does. You tick all the boxes. You spend your 20s and 30s building your career and having your life. And I ended up getting the sort of the ring, positive pregnancy test in the house, all in the case of 9 months. And for 5 years, life was really busy. I was, making babies, having babies, losing babies, just that frenetic 5-year period of building a family. And I remember distinctly the day my third baby, Ruby, was born. And it had been a, wonderful 5 years, few dinner parties in the mix, lovely party. But, it had been a very intense family.
It's a lot of babies in a short amount of time.
I had 7 pregnancies and 3 babies in the end of that. So it had been a busy time forming the family.
Yeah.
And I remember really my mum had been at the birth on the Tuesday because we knew this was the last one. All that trying, all that effort, all of the drama that goes with it was done. This was my last baby, and it was her last grandchild. My brother had 3 children. And I remember thinking, although this was the beginning of something new, obviously with my 3 kids, it felt so like the end of this very intense period where I had very little control of my life.
Even though they were still to be reared.
Well, it's still to be reared, but I still felt that I could control that, Okay. And as somebody up until then I'd travelled a lot, I'd done a lot, I had a great career, I'd been very much in control of my life. And, my first miscarriage, I think, was the first time that I ever realised, oh, gosh, I'm not actually in charge of everything.
Yeah.
So I remember a definite feeling of, look, I'll get rid of the stitches and it's going to be a tough few years, but at least I'm in charge of that. And I had about 4 days of that feeling. And then my mum rang me the day before I was bringing the baby home because I'd had a C-section, and she'd had a lovely day with my other 2 daughters. And she said she loved me, she'll see me the next day. And she went and put my 2 girls to bed and read them a story, and then her brain just exploded and she had a catastrophic stroke. And she was rendered immediately brain damaged, paralysed, incontinent. And I would spend the next year spoon feeding my baby and my mum and changing their nappies. And that went on for 5 years. So I went from 5 years to 5 years. And that sandwich years of just being, and so many women face that now because our parents are living older, we're having children later. And that crushing sort of care model of just trying to look after parents and children at the same time. And 4 years into that, my marriage ended. And 9 months after that happened, my mum died in my arms. So, 2 weeks before my 45th birthday, I kind of looked in the mirror and realised I'd lost the family I'd come from. I'd lost the family I'd built. And what was most surprising wasn't those two things. It was the fact that when I looked in the mirror, I just barely recognised who I was. I'd had my head barrel down in survival mode for 10 years, just constantly reacting and plate spinning and dealing with all of the needs of others.
Can I ask you, who ended the marriage? Who was the kind of the instigator of that?
My ex-husband came out as gay, and it had been a very, very good marriage in many ways, but it had been very unhappy in many ways for me too, and I think it was the end of the road. And
were you surprised when he told you he was gay?
Yes and no. Yes and no. Which is I know it's a weird answer. I remember feeling. I remember for about 40 seconds when I found out, feeling utter relief, like just this absolute wave of relief that it was all over. But then, the tsunami hits of, oh my God, we're actually going to dismantle a family. And I've got his nice single parent, 3 kids. Now he's very involved because he loves them dearly, he sees them. But you're at the cold face of it. But I don't think the end of the reason the end of the marriage affects it that much. I mean, I actually do now coach some women whose husbands have come out of gay, and I think that's probably the last generation of men who will have to do that, who aren't able to just live the life that they want to live or be free to explore who they are. And hopefully I'm the last generation of women to have that experience of maybe not having the marriage you thought you were going to have.
Can I ask you, okay, so he says, I'm gay, and what happens then?
A period of grief, a period of huge fear, trying to figure out how I now deal with this family. It's a real, and it's funny, I now coach women. Not all who are going through a trauma of an end of a marriage. Some of them come to me because they want a whole new phase of life, and I will hopefully talk about that and the air of midlife. But there's real fear of that feeling that there's just me here, and I may not have the emotional capacity to keep going and keep dealing with it. And so, and in that process, also, my mum was dying, and we knew she was dying, and eventually we had to sort of persuade the doctors to fight a little bit to get her home to die. But what's really interesting is that I look back now on that time as probably, and certainly my mum's death, and she died in my arms, and it's an extraordinary moment in anybody's life when you're with someone and you're matching breaths, and they breathe in and you hold your breath and they don't breathe out again, and you've got to breathe for the first time in a world that they've always been breathing in. But I look back on that time as one of the most important times of my life.
And do you feel like you're in a good place now?
Oh, yes, very much so. Very much so. I'm here because of everything that's happened in my life, including those sandwich years in those awful, awful dark nights when my mother had gone, and I had to grieve the person who'd gone and get to love this woman who, she didn't know my name. She never spoke my name again, but she knew who she loved. I started writing a blog, and that blog was called The Sandwich Years, and that blog was seen by a publisher who gave me a book deal on that. And I went back to college, and so I would love for her to be in the front row here today, but I wouldn't be here if she was. So the gratitude piece isn't about being grateful she's gone, but being really grateful for who you are right now in all of the things that have happened to you in your life, in all of the good, the bad, the ugly. You're here.
How can you be grateful for the ugly?
Because everything teaches you something. Now, not in the moment it happens. Obviously, I don't look back now. And, you know, when my husband was packing the spare bags into the back of the car, or spare glasses into the back of the car, I wasn't thinking, oh, yes, what have I gained from this experience? I was thinking, I've got single parenting, debt and a cold sore. Thanks very much. It's not a failure if a marriage ends. It's not a failure if a relationship ends. If you've loved and been loved, that's not negating the pain if somebody moves to move on. But everyone has the right to thrive. And there are going to be some relationships where you stop thriving. And I think it's really important to understand that it's absolutely okay to want to thrive as a human being. Yeah. And one of the things that really pushes me forward and keeps me moving is the idea that I feel really, I really recognise that I have to live a very vibrant, valiant, exciting midlife for me because of the generations of women who just couldn't have had that life, had no access to being able to be creative or learn or do something for themselves. But I think my generation of women, of midlife women, have a massive responsibility to role model to the next generation, to my 3 daughters and to the women coming after, that the only way to survive is not to be hanging on by your fingernails, that you can't be all things to all people without being anything to yourself.
How come you went into life coaching instead of, say, maybe training as a psychotherapist or something? Was there something about life coaching that you preferred?
Yeah, well, partly I'd used it myself a couple of times. And
it's a lot more upfront.
Yeah, so if you were to look at the spectrum, right, you'll have psychotherapy, through to therapy, CBT, counselling, then probably coaching, mentoring. You're going into sort of from looking very much backwards, dealing with the past, dealing with that, all the way going forward. You know, mentoring is all about forward. So coaching would be much more forward focusing. So, like coaching to therapy would be like a physical therapist is to a doctor. Okay. You know, a doctor and a therapist will fix somebody who is ill or needs help, whereas like a physical therapist or a coach will take a reasonably well person and optimise them.
So when women are coming to you, what are the typical type of things they want help with? Yeah,
and there's 2 camps really, although it always ends up being something quite specific. So they'll either come because they've had enormous change thrust upon them, or like a marriage ending, or loss of a job, or maybe their kids have left home and they don't know what the hell to do with themselves. Okay. And they're staring down now another 30 years of fairly young living. Yeah. Whereas before...
And all the crack has gone out of Pat. He's more to golf.
Oh, listen, and there's no... Yeah. And they're
doesn't take Viagra because it hurts his heart.
They're bored out of their minds. And I think that piece around just stopping and asking yourself, are all the things I thought were going to make me happy making me happy? Is there something else I want? Or, you know, how can I be living better? And because women become the practical parent, they become the practical partner, they become the practical daughter, and they're desperate for a bit of crack. And like you say... the
husband might be moving into, might be thinking, let's relax now for a couple of decades.
And they're just going, no way, I'm starting to come out of myself.
Yeah.
And I have, and that's why it's really exciting that we can kind of redefine, and I'm trying to get, my book is called Midlife Redefined, and it is about trying to redefine all of those things, because this is a completely new way of living. We've never had this extended midlife before.
Caused by
longer living.
Okay.
And being younger for much longer. As I said, you used to sort of be old by 55. And now, you know, most people are starting afresh at 55. New relationships or careers or all kinds of things. And I think that's why we get to redefine post marriage relationships now. It doesn't have to be the same one you had before, where you were forming a family and it's all intense and you all have to live together. And it's like, you know, I sort of half joke, I want to take a man's shirt off, not iron it. I've done that. And I don't necessarily want to do that again. And a lot of people don't. Some do, some don't. But you now get to have that choice, I think.
It's adventurous work, Alana, and thank you very much for coming on to the show to tell us about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alana Kirk, everybody. And now would you please welcome Solace Quartet playing a piece by Boccherini. Huge thanks to Solace Quartet for that. They're touring around the country in early March. Hope you enjoyed the show, folks. God bless, good luck, and good night.